Hi, my name is David Scherr. I am an Assistant Attorney General and Co-Chief of the Community Justice Division at the Vermont Attorney General's Office. I have responsibility for all kinds of policy issues that relate to our criminal justice system here in Vermont. That means everything from thinking about new rules and regulations or ways of doing things to changing current rules and ways of doing things with respect to all aspects of our criminal system, all the way from thinking about how to change police oversight and police responsibilities to, on the other end, thinking about changing how we sentence people and making sure that we are dealing with the underlying reasons why people get involved in the system in the first place. And really, our whole goal is to make it so that fewer people are involved in our criminal justice system. So that's my general role and my the general work that I do every day. It's different than standard lawyering. I'd say standard lawyering is where a lawyer goes and has a case, and maybe that's a criminal case, maybe that is a civil case, which means people suing each other, or maybe businesses suing each other because they have a disagreement about a contract or somebody's been harmed by somebody else. That's what a lot of lawyers do. Another thing that a lot of lawyers do is called contract law or transactional law, which just means helping people formulate new businesses or work together as a business or among businesses. But what I do, as I mentioned, is a little bit different than that. It's really thinking more broadly about what the rules ought to be that other lawyers have to work within. I really like the work. I actually got to it through a more typical pathway in terms of more typical lawyering. I went to college and then I went to law school. Right out of law school, I worked at a regular law firm in Burlington, Vermont, where I did all kinds of commercial litigation, which again just means businesses have disagreements with each other and they end up in court. And so I represented businesses doing that for a couple of years. And then after that, I went and did public defense work, which means that I represented low-income individuals who ended up in the criminal justice system, who were accused by the police and prosecutors of having done something illegal. And then I stepped in, but they didn't have enough money to defend themselves. And the Constitution of the United States actually gives everybody in America the right to have an attorney represent them if they are accused of having done something wrong. So I was one of those people who stepped in where if somebody didn't have enough money to hire their own attorney, I represented them. And I did that for a number of years. It was really exciting, engaging, intense work. I learned a huge amount doing it, and I learned some of the ways in which I think our system doesn't work as well as it should. I think that some folks end up in the criminal system when, in fact, they should probably have been sent through other pathways, gotten treatment for mental health issues, gotten treatment for substance use issues. And I think we'd all be better off if we did a better job of getting people the help they really need instead of going through the criminal system, which is a really expensive way of doing things. Because you got to pay all the lawyers, you got to pay, somebody ends up incarcerated, you have to pay a lot to incarcerate them. And that is actually how I ended up in my current job, was thinking about those issues and talking about them with the current Attorney General, whose name is TJ Donovan. And he hired me to help him think about ways that we can do a better job of keeping our communities safe. So that's what I work on now. And what do I do? I'd say, or I should say, I guess I'll talk a little bit about what I like about my job. So what I really like about my job is all the ways that I get to work with people from all over the state. I work with police officers, I work with substance use treatment providers, I work with mental health treatment providers, I work with even sometimes with hospitals, I work with legislators. I spent actually a lot of time in our state legislature trying to figure out how we can make our laws work better and work more effectively. And I really love that aspect of my job. I get to just work with a lot of people, talk with a lot of people, and it also brings with it challenges. We don't always agree with everybody, and so that means we have to politely figure out ways to work with people where we can, and maybe we have to disagree in some places, but we try to take into account everybody's opinion and be fair about how we come to conclusions on things and how we advocate for things in the legislature. My days vary a lot. It kind of depends on the season, actually. During the winter, I spend a lot of time in the state legislature, as I mentioned. And then during those times, I really work hard on figuring out the best ways that we can keep Vermonters safe. And that means changing the rules. It means improving the current rules. Sometimes it means stopping proposals that we think are not such a great idea, or maybe at least trying to tweak proposals that we think are not such a great idea to be a little bit better. So that's really a lot of my time from about January through May, which is a typical legislative session, although this year, 2020, was not such a typical year and the legislature went much longer. When I'm not doing that, I have a lot of other responsibilities. I end up serving as the Attorney General's designee on a lot of different boards and commissions. So what happens is the legislature creates all sorts of different bodies to try to regulate things, or to make new rules about things, or to figure out ways that we can be doing things better. And because the Attorney General is a statewide office holder with a lot of different responsibilities, from consumer protection to criminal law to environmental protection, the Attorney General often gets asked to serve on all these different boards and commissions that the legislature creates. And because my job is really dealing with policy, sort of like the big ideas about how we're going to do things, I get asked to serve on a lot of those boards and commissions. So when the legislature isn't in session, I do actually spend a lot of my time working on those bodies and working with individuals all across state government and all across our state. We work with a lot of community members and advocates who are trying to advance certain ideas to try to figure out the best way to do things. And so that's a lot of my time. The legislature usually gives us assignments. In other words, they will say in law, they'll actually say, hey, we want the Attorney General's office to look into this idea or this way of doing things, or we want you to work with these community groups or these other state government entities and figure out how we can change the rules. So I spend a lot of time doing that in the off session. And by the off session, I mean when the legislature is not in session. And in doing that, we're all getting ready for the next legislative session. So that is, I realize that isn't a great picture of my typical day because they change so much, but it's really a lot of talking with other people, figuring out what we can do right, researching what the law is and what other states are doing. I actually spend a fair amount of time trying to figure out what people around the country are doing and figuring out what the best ideas are from elsewhere and seeing if we can incorporate that into what we do here in Vermont. In terms of what might make a student a good fit for your line of work, I'd say if you are curious about how the world works and maybe even a little bit frustrated by how the world works and you want to make changes and figuring out how we can do things better, I would say that this would be a good line of work for you. I also think that a lot of what got me prepared to do this work was getting real experience as a regular lawyer. I didn't always do what I'm doing now. I used to just do cases like lawyers do. And that was really important to helping me understand how things really work in courtrooms and how things really work for people in their lives. It gave me a lot of insight. And I think being somebody who's curious, who wants to work with people, who wants to learn, and who would like to see things be a little bit different than they are. All of those are things that I think would be great and for a great fit for this line of work. And as I said, I think being a sort of more standard lawyer was a really good way for me to start and getting into this. And for that, I'd really recommend just being a reader, enjoying reading, enjoying learning things, enjoying new ideas, and having a fairly logical outlook on things, sort of like a linear, if this happens, then what does that mean? What will happen next? what follows from this idea? How does this other idea change it? That type of thinking is a big part of lawyering and is really important. But ultimately, I really think that the best lawyers are people who want to help people, who like working with people, and the sort of technical aspects of thinking and how you do the job are important to doing it well. But ultimately, you need that motivation of wanting to work with people and help people. So that's an overview of my job. It's a little bit unusual, I would say. It's not like a standard job. It doesn't fit into normal categories. There aren't a huge number of people who do the work that I do here in Vermont. I actually think that my job is most similar to what you see down more in the federal government in DC, where you've got people in the various federal agencies whose job it is to figure out new policies and create new policies. I'd actually say that's a more typical example. There are a few other people in Vermont state government like me, but not a huge number. So that is an overview of what I do. If anybody wants to reach out and learn more about my job and talk with me directly, I'm happy to talk with anybody and talk a little bit more and answer any questions. Thank you so much.